In this economy, it seems like the Rays made a great deal to improve the rotation.
You are Locked On Rays, your daily Tampa Bay Rays podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Rays podcast. Locked On Rays is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network, your team every day. And we are Kevin and Ulises.
And we are lifelong Rays fans who have been podcasting about the Tampa Bay Rays since 2019.
Later on today's show, the Rays payroll hinges on a new stadium deal. In a few minutes, there's little doubt that the Rays' new ballpark will be on the Tampa side. But to start, the Steven Matz deal is now official.
And we're going to talk about all of that thanks to FanDuel. People, if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. Kevin, the Rays got their right starter for the right price in Steven Matz. A couple of names that the Rays were interested in that we talked about earlier this offseason, they've both signed, and boy, we guessed it, they got better deals than Steven Matz. Merrill Kelly, 2 years, $40 million. Adrian Hauser, 2 years, $22 million, while Steven Matz, 7.5 each year, so a total of 2 years for 15, plus a $500,000 bonus if traded. Yes. Kevin, what say you about the economics of this Steven Matz deal?
I think it makes sense at the end of the day, especially when you see what Merrill Kelly got and what Adrian Hauser got. You look back and say, okay, now it makes sense, because Steven Matz wasn't really on anybody's radar. If you're a Rays fan, we know we're not shooting for the moon and getting Dylan Cease or somebody of that ilk, but we did mention Merrill Kelly. We did mention Adrian Hauser. And based off of what those two got, a reunion of Zach Littell seems more and more unlikely, because he's probably going to get somewhere in the middle or might even get more years than those guys. So when you look at it and say 2 years, $15 million for Steven Matz, not too shabby, especially when you consider that he has the command, he has the feel, he has the starter experience. If the Rays are in the luxury position of Shane Baz being healthy all year round, Ryan Pepio being healthy, Shane Baz, Shane McClanahan, Joe Boyle kicks it off, Ian Seymour kicks it off. Okay, well, you can always put Steven Matz in the bullpen. He'll still get paid his money, and he'll still be a valuable contributor for the roster. I mean, it's a win-win for really the Rays and for Steven Matz as well, because Steven Matz, he wants to be a starter. He'll get that opportunity in spring training and likely early on in the season. Now, if the Rays have, a rich in depth with starting pitching, and you have to move him back to the bullpen for one reason or another, he's still getting paid that 2-year, $15 million deal. So the money's still coming to him, whether he's pitching 70 innings a year or 140 innings a year.
Which, of course, let's get us down to reality. It's most likely not going to happen, that scenario where the starting rotation is just giving you start after start and, oh man, we don't have room for Steven Matz anymore in the rotation. I don't foresee that happening, but your point is well taken. No matter what happens with his role, he's getting paid. And again, this is an opportunity for a guy to recoup that, hey, I'm a starter, than just a relief guy. And when you look at the quotes from Neander and Steven Matz and, saying that, there were no complaints from Cardinals officials saying when they moved him to the bullpen, like, he took that in stride. And I think that's the kind of guy that Neander and the Rays front office do like to have in the clubhouse, and we have talked about guys like Rasmussen and Littell and Sean Armstrong and guys that have been, perceived as one type of role and then expanded or the other way, just minimized, like Alex Colomé. Okay, you don't crack it as a starter. We're going to give you the chance to just be one of the best closers we ever have. And he did become that. So it's just that flexibility, that role flexibility to be okay with that. I think that's huge. And coming from a guy that's a veteran so that other guys can look at him and see if he's okay with it. How am I going to say no? If Ian Seymour is not feeling it, that they're not really giving him a role, or Joe Boyle, and he's seeing Steven Matz, he's like, well, if he's doing it, you gotta. That's why veteran leadership matters, because when you're not really liking it, or you're thinking, oh, poor me, you look across the clubhouse and you see a guy like Steven Matz, and you're like, that gives you perspective.
It really does. And Steven Matz, I'd have to look back at his numbers and see how much money he's made in his career. But at the end of the day, he's a 11, 12-year MLB veteran, and he's made more money than, I don't know, 99% of the Rays roster.
Yeah.
If he's willing to have the attitude of, I will do whatever is necessary to help the team and help the team win ball games, that can permeate the organization. And that's ultimately the type of guy that the Rays want to get. They're not necessarily focused on the individuals that are me. It's, at the end of the day, it's a sum of the parts roster, and you do whatever you have to do to help your team win. And that might be being a versatility player. Maybe it's platoons, maybe a defensive replacement, maybe going from a starter to a reliever. So having that attitude, I think, is especially important. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I do think that Steven Matz is very intrigued with the ability to work with Kyle Snyder in the Rays organization to get him from a bullpen to a starter role. But if it doesn't work out, I think he will still be very satisfied in the bullpen role. So I think it's going to work out one way or the other for the Rays and Steven Matz. And again, it's not like he's that far removed from being a starter. I mean, he's got, 6-7 year track record at least of being able to do that. So I don't think it's going to be as difficult as maybe some people put it out to be. And, I know that we talked earlier this week about, if the Rays are targeting Ketel Marte, that means they must be confident in Shane McClanahan's return. Well, you just don't know what's going to happen at the end of the day. What's going to happen with him, or what's going to happen with Rasmussen or Pepio or Boz or Boyle or Seymour. You better have lots of guys that can take the ball from pitch one and hopefully give you at least a 5 and dive situation. And I think that Steven Matz has the capability to do that at the end of the day.
And you're taking a guy that, I mean, it's December, it's mid-December. So he has plenty of time for Steven Matz to do the appropriate work to stretch himself out. This is not in the middle of the season where hey, we don't have a starter, we need you to go in there, Zach Littell. Can we stretch you out? So they've done that. So I don't see any issue with him being stretched out. Also, he's not been a reliever for 10 years either. So I don't see that as an issue. I will say though, when you talk about Kyle Snyder, it's so cool that the reputation has just permeated throughout, MLB. Steven Matz saying kind of I've always been interested in what they've done from afar. And so when they came knocking, I was already interested and knew that this is a place where a guy like me can have success. And that is such a cool part of what the Rays have built so far with their mystique and their reputation. It follows them, and that's awesome. But the Rays are also making some progress on a new stadium for 2029.
NFL Sundays move fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. And FanDuel lets you jump into the moment with live spreads and money lines adjusting instantly, player props updating as guys heat up, and then you can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. Ultimately, it keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, and frankly, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you.
Thank you for tuning into Locked On Race and making it your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network in all of the galaxy. And if you want to take it up a level, people, for just $5, you can join the Everydayer Club and get this podcast with no interruptions and members only Discord channel. Go to lockedonrays.supercast.com or check the link in the show notes to learn more. Book it, Kevin. The new Rays Stadium will be in Tampa, not St. Pete. And I'm telling you this because there was an article written not too many days past this recording where it kind of went through the whole stadium search with very little mention of St. Pete. But I'll tell you what, there was one thing that opened up my eyes, like, Bugs Bunny or Daffy Duck. When it said that, Ken Babby confirmed that at their request, at the Rays ownership request, Tampa Mayor Jane Castor toured the Atlanta Braves ballpark development known as the Battery, which they consider a model of what they hope to build for the Tampa Bay Rays, and that she indeed went. Now, I read this and I was like, okay, that's it, baby. We're going to get a Tampa stadium.
Yeah. I would think so. I mean, based on that article, it's funny you mentioned about very little mention of St. Pete. I think the only mention of St. Pete was the idea or thought that if the Rays can't open a new stadium by 2029, if the construction timeline is too challenging based on getting all the agreements in place and, digging dirt for the first time, that the Trop agreement could be extended another year till 2030. But I didn't see anywhere of...
Which we've talked about before. Which we've talked about,
which is perfectly fine. If you have to play in Trop for another year, so be it. It's not the end of the world. But the fact that there wasn't much, if any, mention of Mayor Ken Welch or the St. Pete City Council or the Pinellas County Commissioners, it's pretty damning. Or if you want to look at it another way, it's pretty indicative that this new ownership group is laser focused on the Tampa side of things. And in the article, we know the locations that are prime right now. It's the HCC site near Raymond James. It's Rocky Point Golf Course, State Fairgrounds in Ybor City. Those are the prime four right there. But that mention of basically personally inviting Tampa Mayor Jane Castor, hey, we want you to check this out. This is our vision for what we want to do in Tampa with what the Atlanta Braves did with the Battery is pretty telling that they're fully leaning in to we're basically just focused on the city of Tampa in Hillsborough County. And
what better way to sell your vision than, hey, look at this that has worked. I mean, it's very psychologically speaking, it works way better than, hey, look at this rendering. Hey, look at this model. Hey, look at this 3D, 4D tour that we created on Vizio.
Yeah.
Who cares?
I don't need to see another slide deck. I've seen a million of them.
Yeah, stop with the PowerPoint presentations. I get it, man. It's a Vizio, though. I don't care. This is way better of a selling technique here. Is like, no, this is what we could do. Imagine if we could do this in Raymond James. Imagine if we could do this in Ybor. Imagine if we could do this in the state fairgrounds. Imagine, the connecting, bridge from Hard Rock Casino to the a Rays Stadium in the fairgrounds. Like, you could do so much. So I think that was the thing that made me just, wow, okay, they're really doing, because it didn't say, hey, the Rays paid for Ken Welch to go up there. That didn't happen.
Yeah, which is very interesting. And you might say, well, hey, there's not enough ink space in the article. Well, Tampa Bay Times is basically all digital now. So be able to have a couple more lines for your online article or online piece. But it seems, I'm getting the impression that the Rays new ownership group is pretty much putting St. Pete to the side and is laser focused on Tampa. And we know that, Hillsborough County Commissioner Ken Hagan has been a big champion for bringing the Rays to Tampa, and Mayor Jane Castor, has thrown out some quotes and quips here and there of, hey, it'd be great to have the Rays on the Tampa side. And it just makes sense at the end of the day. I mean, it's the same talking points that have been discussed over and over. There's a reason why the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are in Tampa and not St. Pete. There's a reason why the Tampa Bay Lightning are in Tampa and not St. Pete. It's the population. It's the corporation base. You have the downtown workers. You're near the family hubs like Wesley Chapel and Brandon and Riverview. And it's something that we cannot forget about, because those sponsorships, not just getting butts in the seats, which you would be able to do more so on Tampa than in St. Pete, but it's those corporate sponsors, the naming rights, the premium seating, the fancy suites, that all adds up. Plus, I mean, it might be a too soon of a situation, but I feel like you're less likely to get hit by a devastating hurricane in Tampa than right on the
right. Beach. That's also something that should be taken into consideration now. Hey, it happened. It could happen again. Although they say that, lightning doesn't strike twice in the same place, but I think that's just a myth, and it actually can happen. Now, Kev, we know we've made the point here of the takeaway. Now, I do want to have some fun with you for the next 43 seconds.
Okay.
How much money do you think that trip cost the Rays?
To fly Jane Castor to Atlanta, put her up in a hotel, give her the 5-cent tour, take her out to dinner, a couple grand maybe.
Okay.
A drop in the bucket in comparison to what you could get. Tampa and Hillsborough County would be able to contribute for a new ballpark. We're talking $500, $600, $700 million, which that's the other thing. Look, as far as business climate and business friendly environment and being more accommodating to corporations, that's more in Tampa's wheelhouse and Hillsborough County's wheelhouse than St. Petersburg's wheelhouse. I'm just saying.
And that's the point that I was trying to make, Kev, is that it was an incredibly smart decision financially. Like, it's going to cost them $2,000. You could bag that deal by this, expense.
By just a trip.
I'm
an hour and a half flight to Atlanta, or however long it takes to fly there.
I'm serious here, because do people not make decisions of a PowerPoint deck presentation, of just a speech? People do that every single day. Yeah. They make big decisions of a bleeping deck. Okay. Well, guess what? If you're living it and breathing it, I think that was a tremendously smart idea, Kev. And speaking of stadiums, a new ballpark on the Tampa side, well, that's the only way that we will see the payroll drastically change. All right, everybody, thank you so much for tuning into Locked On Rays, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A new stadium or a redevelopment plus a stadium is the key for the Rays to notably increase payroll. Well, Kevin, there was an article by Romano, I believe in the Tampa Bay Times, that, well, he kind of went back and did a little bit of comparisons between cities that open up a stadium and how their payroll changes. And all of the examples should make Rays fans hopeful and happy that that's the way that it would go. Obviously, we all remember the Miami Marlins opening that stadium in 2012 and all the stars that they got. And we also remember the big fire sale they had 4 or 5 months later after all that. Hopefully, that's not the way that it goes for the Rays, and it goes a little bit more like the Braves or the Twins of 2010. But all the examples, Kev, it just shows an arrow trend up. You open a new stadium, you open some redevelopment, and that payroll will follow up.
100%. And again, the thought might be, hey, why are we bringing up stadium stuff? Well, it's getting to the point where decisions are going to have to be made and something's going to have to be put in the ground at some point, be it on the Tampa side or St. Petersburg side. I think definitely the Tampa side. But to this article and to your point, the Rays certainly don't want to make the same mistake the Marlins did, where you just plop a ballpark in a bad location. Yeah, it's a great ballpark, spanking new, retractable roof, amazing, but you don't have the redevelopment to go with it. That's where you look at the Braves model, and that's more the focal point, and you see what they've not only done in increasing payroll, but sustaining that payroll. In fact, their payroll increased 42% from 86 million to 122 million when Truist Park opened in 2017.
Yep.
And since then, they've gone from a mid-range payroll team to a top 10 organization the past 4 years. That's not just from having Truist Park, that's having the Battery redevelopment surrounding it, which is what the Rays are targeting. And again, the new ownership group was very clear when they took the team. They said, the finances of this organization have not changed just because we took over. We're not Steve Cohen here. There's been many ownership changes that don't levy a big change in payroll. You can look at Pittsburgh, you can look at Miami, you can look at Seattle, you can look at Cincinnati, the list goes on and on. But the difference maker is we'll have a new ballpark and new redevelopment site in tow, which you theoretically can go from an $85 million payroll to, I don't know, 110, 115, 120 in time. And look, what has actually changed since the new ownership group has come aboard, besides some of the front office changes and more fan engagement and things like that? You signed Cedric Mullins for $7 million. You signed Jake Fraley for $3 million. And you signed Steven Matz for 2 years, $15 million. That's pretty much in line with the Stu Sternberg era.
Yeah.
No disrespect. So again, that is going to continue to be the ethos until 2029, 2030, 2031, 2032 hits around, if the Rays hit a home run with the new redevelopment and ballpark.
Right. I mean, again, if everything goes according to plan, then you're thinking, okay, then the ballpark opens up in 2029, right? If everything is smooth, it opens up in 2029. Our friend of the pod, David Sampson, who has his own pod, very successful.
Yes.
He said, it ain't happening in 2029. All right. It's just not going to happen. It's going to be delayed, which, all right, we've talked about the opportunity that if that happens, the trop. So you're talking 2030, 2031.
Right.
And so it's 2025. Okay. We're almost done here. But that's 4-5 years away of actually seeing that payroll increase. So that's why it's so important, Kev, for this redevelopment to just hit it and hit it big, to be at a hub, to become maybe a hub of itself, to get some part of its surrounding and just become like a little
hangout spot, basically.
Hangout spot within an already popular hangout spot.
Right.
It can't just be what you said with Miami, just like plop down this stadium and I hope they come. That's not fun. Like if you were just to drop this stadium in Lakeland, like, okay, who's going to go there? Like it's not serving anybody. You have to put it within the neighborhood, within the city. So like it actually becomes its own thing, but it feeds off from the surroundings.
It's like a city within a city. And which going back to the Jane Castor thing in her trip to the Battery, I wonder if that was during the regular season or in the off season. My guess is it was probably in the off season, and maybe that might have made more an impression of look how much this area is hopping without a baseball game going on.
And in a year that the Braves were not a playoff team. So I think it was great. And also I do believe it would have been after the season because they had their press conference, the ownership, I believe, after the regular season, right?
Okay. Yeah, that would have been too tough of a turnaround, I think.
Yeah, so I think it must have been in October or November. Whatever it was, I think it wasn't after the regular season. More power to them to have done this. Dude, if you're a Rays fan, which, by the way, if you're not, I'm cool. Thank you for listening and watching Locked On Rays.
I guess you were here to listen in on Steven Matz in his Cardinals days.
And you really liked what we had to say, and you kept on listening. And thank you for that. But if you're a Rays fan, man, like this should just be such a hopeful time because we deserve to have this one nice thing that we have forever chased since basically 2008.
Right. And here's the thing. You're not going to win a World Series with an $85 million payroll. You can get close. You can get very close. You can get to game 6 or game 7, maybe.
We've seen that. Yeah,
but
we've seen that. Yeah.
I feel like with Neander in place and others in place, you go from an $85 million payroll to 110, 115, 120, somewhere in that ballpark. You can be a World Series contender.
Yeah.
on a regular basis. You
Yeah.
would have the money to get that missing piece or two that the Rays have been without when you're in the playoff hunt, where you can have that veteran who's been there, done that, that can have the big moment, and you don't just have to rely on Randy Arozarena in his rookie year to do that.
You'd have the ability to go after a free agent like Pete Alonso. You know,
Yeah.
I know some people that are analytically driven are not really good not fans of Pete Alonso. So I'll give you another guy, Freddie Freeman, that the Rays pursued and could not get
Marcell
him.
Ozuna.
Marcell Ozuna, like just guys that can just change the lineup construction, just the lineup dynamic. Somebody that is going to be a little bit bigger than what you hope your guys can be.
Yeah.
Just a proven veteran, because ultimately you see it in playoffs year after year after year. Yes, you're going to have your auxiliary parts. Somebody's going to pop off. Okay. Somebody's going to be a Kike Hernandez. You're going to see that.
Right.
But you also need that dude, that guy who people are afraid of, and he is going to turn that lineup around.
And even those mid-level players too that may not have really considered the Rays all that seriously, of like, hey, I don't want to play in St. Petersburg in an empty ballpark. I want to, but if you have all this brand spanking new, you might be able to draw that $8 to $12 million player that previously would go elsewhere. And here's the final thing. Again, new ownership group. You got Cedric Mullins, Jake Fraley, Steven Matz. When Zalewski took over, we weren't getting Dylan Cease. We weren't getting Kyle Tucker. We weren't getting Pete Alonso. We weren't getting any of those names. But when it rolls around 2030, 2031, 2032, you might have more of a chance to get a player like that. Not saying you get all the players, but one or two players.
And BT Dubs, to close this out, I will say something that needs to be said. And I know people are going to be like, oh, well, what did you have to say that? But I have to say it. You got Fraley. You got Mullins. You got Matz. That's awesome. But also you got rid of Pete Fairbanks to make room for those guys. So like, yes, that's awesome on one side, but the other side of being a $85 million payroll is that you got those guys because you also said no to your closer.
Yes. On that note, we hope you all have a wonderful day. And we do want to remind you to be one of the first to join the Everydayer Club to get your favorite show ad-free and exclusive access to the members-only Discord channel. Be sure to look for that in the show notes of this episode.